The purpose of this episode is not to talk about the ancestry of Anne Frank. There are many resources for that on the internet. In fact, you could just go to genie.com and see who all of her ancestors are. What I really wanted to do in this episode is use this as an opportunity to talk about the fantastic book that I just read that most of you have definitely heard about, and that is The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. This is Anne Frank's diary that she wrote mostly when they were in the secret annex in Amsterdam. And this was the first time I've ever sat down and read the book start to finish. I may have had clips of it shown to me in grade school, but this is really the first time that I've truly read the whole thing. And what else can I say, folks? It is an amazing, amazing book. Definitely one of the best books that I've ever read in my entire life, and that's saying a lot because I read a decent amount. So I just wanted to delve into some of the finer points of what I thought was so incredible about Anne Frank's diary, and I also wanted to use this as an opportunity to hype her up as a genealogist because she talks about going through family pedigrees and trees on a number of occasions. I mean, early on in the book, on page 37, she talks about how she and her father were working on their family tree, and then later on goes on to talk about how she's into the ancestry of royal family and things like that. So it's very clear that genealogy was one of Anne Frank's hobbies, which makes her story relevant for this channel, even though I'm not really talking about her own personal ancestry. Now, for those who don't know, Anne Frank was a young girl living in Amsterdam who she and her family and another family hid in the attic of a house when the Nazis occupied the Netherlands. It's written from her point of view where she goes basically day to day talking about what's going on, all the struggles that she and her family go through, her internal thoughts and musings. And the edition that I read is the definitive edition, so to give a little bit of context, her father, who published the book, had taken out a number of passages and edited down the book so that some of the more controversial topics were taken out. These including things like Anne Frank talking about getting her period and her thoughts about sex, and also a lot of really negative things that she said about her mother and maybe some other members of the family. So this version, the definitive version, it takes her original words and her original editings of the book, and it presents them in as original of a way as possible, with some spelling corrections and things like that. But it is a fantastic version of the book. It really gives you an unfiltered look into her mindset. And what an incredible mindset she had. I mean, I can hardly believe this was written by a 13 to 15-year-old kid. The insights that she has on her family and the world around her feel like that of somebody who is much, much older. She has a really keen understanding of the internal reasonings and motivations behind people in her lives, including herself. She's able to talk about her and her family's place in this annex and the conflicts that they go through, all while being very well aware of the horrors that are happening in the war around her. This is not a good time for her and her family. They are dealing with shortages of food. They can't go outside. They're stuck with each other. And for those of you who remember what the beginning of the 2020 pandemic was like, I mean, imagine that, but times 50, because they literally could not go outside at all for fear of getting arrested. And they have to basically deal with each other in this cramped space. And as you can imagine, a lot of tensions come to the surface, a lot of bickering. But on the other hand, they are still living out a couple of years of their lives in this annex. And so a lot of really positive things happen, a lot of internal realizations on Anne's part. There's a beautiful, beautiful love story between her and this other boy, Peter, who are living in the annex. And it really feels like the internal workings of a teenage girl going through that same coming of age, that same angst that any young person would have, except it's set in this backdrop of World War II and the Holocaust. The writing is of such a high caliber, I had to stop myself multiple times throughout the book to just sit back and think, wow, I can't believe how good this is, how strong the writing is, how insightful of a person Anne Frank was. And it makes it all the more devastating when you get to the end and you get the little addendum showing you what happened to the family shortly after she finished her final journal entry. But I think she also recognized that she was a good author. She talks a lot about writing other stories and about maybe one day publishing her diary as a standalone book after the war is over. And of course, this ended up happening, but not of her own volition. But because she was planning on doing this anyways, the writing is carefully considered. She definitely went back and edited a number of passages, and you can even see her evolution as a person from the age of 13 to 15. I mean, there are times where she has maybe a more base level understanding of people's motivations, and then she'll come back and leave a little note a year later saying, wow, I was really wrong about this. I misunderstood things. Maybe I judged somebody too much. So for somebody, not just of her age, but of anyone, to have this deep of an understanding of what's going on around her and why people act the way that they do, I mean, this book is just incredible. I sincerely wish that I had read this book when I was a teenager, because a lot of the themes that it explores are the same kinds of things that any young person goes through when they're growing up. And, while as an adult, I really am just impressed by the quality of the writing, I think that anybody who is young and discovering themselves and trying to figure out their place in the world can benefit from reading Anne Frank's diary, because it's like having somebody speak to you about the same exact kinds of feelings that everybody goes through. So I really mean this without hyperbole. Anne Frank's The Diary of a Young Girl is easily one of the best books that I've ever read. I highly recommend everybody read it, whether you're into genealogy or not, though it is kind of cool that, she was a genealogist and she explored her family history. So that was a nice little surprise when going through the book, and it gives me an excuse to talk about it on this channel. If you like this episode, give it a thumbs up. Tell me what you think about Anne Frank's diary in the comment section below. Be sure to follow me on social media. I've included links down below to both my Instagram and my Twitter. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.